The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
And hello, everybody, and happy Sunday to you. Hope everybody enjoyed a great weekend this week leading up to Christmas, which is going to be next weekend. So we want to wish everyone a Merry early Christmas, but we got a full show for you. The 2024 SEC schedule was released on Wednesday. That's definitely an exciting times for the conference. Texas and Oklahoma will officially be joining the brethren of the SEC in July. And we'll also be continuing on with our bowl previews. If you looked a couple of weeks back, we did the non-New Year's Six. And now let's go on to the New Year's Six bowl games. So we'll talk about the SEC teams in the New Year's Six, but we'll also be picking, the other ones like Liberty, Oregon, and also let's see what else. Georgia. Well, obviously all the rest is, SEC teams in it. So we're going to recap all of them, look ahead to the 2024 SEC schedule, and then do our SEC fantasy. But with all that said, once again with me is my co-host Wade. Wade, how you doing? I know that you're in some brutal fantasy matchups. Fantasy playoffs are here. So how's your weekend been so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Getting into the Christmas spirit, getting all the shopping knocked out. But it is fun to have some bowl games on TV. I watched the Louisiana Lafayette bowl game against Jacksonville State. That was an overtime thriller. And then, like we suspected, we talked on the other show that UCLA and Boise State game was pretty intense there for a while and had a lot of points. So it's good to have bowl games on TV, and we look forward to recapping a few more for you.
Yeah, great start for me on Bowl Mania. I went 6-1 yesterday.
Yeah, Tyler's leading it back.
My only loss was New Mexico State, which I thought that was the lock, but man, Fresno State took it to them. But let's get right into it. We got a full show, like I said. No college football team playoff check-in. That's already set. So like always on the show, if you have any questions that pertain to SEC football or football around the conference, be sure to leave a comment. So let's get right into the action here. Let's continue with what we left off with 2 weeks ago with SEC Fantasy. SEC Fantasy is presented by our good friends over at Mahler Bros Golf. If you want to upgrade on or off the golf course this year or even heading into 2024, use code BELLYUP at MahlerBros.com and receive 15% off of your first purchase to upgrade your golfing gear. Let's get into the SEC Fantasy rules. We'll just get a little refresher for those who haven't been on the show here for a while. 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 defenses. We already did our draft for the regular bowls, so you get 1 player from the regular bowls, and then on this show we get 1 player for the New Year's Six, and we get the playoff as well. We do have 1 SEC team, Alabama. They'll be in the Rose Bowl against Michigan. So let's go ahead and get back to the SEC Fantasy Draft. Let's go on with the quarterbacks. You're going to go with Missouri's gunslinger and Brady Cook, his matchup against Ohio State. I'm going to go with the lone playoff quarterback, Jalen Milroe, out of Alabama, getting Michigan. So tell me about Brady Cook's matchup going up against a very good Ohio State defense.
Yeah, Ohio State's defense is good, but I think Brady Cook and this Missouri offense is really going to test them. Ohio State's had a few guys transfer out. Missouri has done a great job of keeping these guys together as a team, and I think that you're going to see an A-plus effort out of Brady Cook and Cody Schrader, Luther Burden, and all these guys. I mean, I think they really want to win this football game, and just the way these bowl games have gone the last couple of years, that goes a long way, We see guys saving themselves for the NFL or opting out all entirely, transferring. So I just feel like Brady Cook is a really safe pick. I think you're going to see his A game, and I think he's going to have probably pretty close to 300 all-purpose yards. This game could become a shootout. If it is, that's even better for Cook.
Yeah, it was really the pick of the litter here. You could have went with Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, Ole Miss's quarterback with Jackson Dart, but I decided to tap into the playoff here. These are definitely two defenses going at it. This could definitely be a low-scored matchup, but the way that Jalen Milroe has been playing the last couple of weeks, going back to the Auburn game, he played really well down the stretch, and then the Georgia game, he played well too. So this Alabama offense, really slow start to the season, but I think that they're clicking at the right time. So I would feel confident going Jalen Milroe. Might be spoiling my pick of who I'm going to be leaning in that matchup. We'll see. But we see Brady Cook and Jalen Milroe. We'll probably be seeing both of these quarterbacks as Jalen Milroe has announced that he's coming back for his senior year. And I'm sure, Cook is going to be coming back as well. For the running backs, you're going to be keeping it with the Missouri train, going with Cody Schrader. He took our running back of the year on last week's show. Quinshon Judkins is going to be my running back heading into the bowl season against a very physical Penn State defensive front. But once again, you're going to go after that Ohio State defense to go with Cody Schrader.
Yeah, and Ohio State's defense, like we just mentioned, they're a good bunch. And I think it's less about the matchup, more about the overall individual effort. This Missouri offense runs through Cody Schrader. They're going to throw him the ball. He's going to get 20-plus carries. I really like him in this one. I think Quinshon Judkins is going to be really good for you as well. Ole Miss has kind of turned back more into a running team down the stretch here, and I think they're going to have to run the ball if they want to beat Penn State. So I like the pick.
Yeah, and what could very well be the last time that we see Cody Schrader in SEC fantasy. He gets the nod there. And like you mentioned, Judkins, Ole Miss, last time that they were on the field in the Egg Bowl, their passing offense didn't look really good. Judkins really had to carry the load there. I think that against Penn State, their defense that has one of the best secondaries in the country. So if you want to get after him, I feel like Quinshon Judkins is going to have a good game. Jackson Dart, you'll probably see him use his legs too. So I feel confident going with Judkins. Definitely has been an up and down season for him, but I think that he finishes out the 2023 campaign on a good note. Let's go on now to the wide receivers. This is going to be the first time that we see on the show here a Georgia player here on the New Year's Six. We are rolling still with the Missouri players. So, every slide it's been a Missouri player, whether it be the quarterback, the running back, and now the receiver. You're going with Ladd McConkey. I've drafted him a couple of times. He's been really solid for me. He has Florida State, and then Luther Burden again has Ohio State. So talk about McConkey against a Florida State team that, it was really the talk of the town of being left out of the playoffs. So definitely going to be an interesting matchup for McConkey in Georgia.
Yeah, I went with McConkey because I think this is another senior that will really want to leave it all out on the field. I'm not sure if Brock Bowers will be in this game. If he is, that could take some attention off of Ladd, but I think he'll get his targets. I almost went with Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, but I just felt like the way that Ole Miss passing attack has been, I couldn't trust it against a tough Penn State defense, so I ended up going with Ladd McConkey here. Florida State's defense has been really impressive down the stretch, but I think McConkey will find a way to get his.
Yeah, and speaking of Ole Miss, some big transfer news. Juice Wells is heading to Ole Miss. So that Ole Miss wide receiver group heading into 2024 is looking really good. I think that Ole Miss next year, the way that their schedule sets up, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. That might be, one of those teams that might even sneak their way into the Atlanta for the SEC championship. Who knows? But I'm going to go Luther Burden. Burden's definitely been one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. I think that Cook and Schrader, it's definitely been the 1-2 punch, but you can't forget about Luther Burden III. I think that they're going to have to spread out this Ohio State defense. Really where Ohio State can beat you is their rush defense. They're really good up front. I think that they can, Luther Burden against that secondary, create some open space for him. So I think that Luther Burden should definitely have a great game against Ohio State. Now let's go on to the defenses. We always talk defenses are always a crucial part here when we talk about SEC fantasy. You're going with Ole Miss's defense going up against a Penn State offense that really hasn't impressed me this whole entire season. Georgia going up against a Florida State offense that without Jordan Travis, they haven't also been impressive. So Ole Miss versus Penn State's offense, how are you feeling about that matchup?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it. Ole Miss's defense has gotten better down the stretch. Like you said, Penn State Drew Aller. I mean, they've had their moments, but they really haven't put together a complete season. They could show up humming in the bowl game, and this looks like a really bad pick, but I think that more likely than not, this game will be kind of low scoring. Obviously, I like the Georgia pick. I think that playing a Florida State team that is a little beat up, I think that Georgia is going to have a really good showing. I also think Alabama's defense could really limit Michigan as well. I thought about taking that route, but ultimately, I had to respect Michigan, as the number 1 team in the country. So that's why I went with the Rebels, but we'll see how they do.
I did want to complete off the Missouri trifecta. You don't trust in their defense against Ohio State?
I mean, they are playing without their normal quarterback, potentially their running back. So that could have been an option, but kind of spreading the bet over a couple different games rather than going all in against Missouri.
Yeah, I like it. Getting some teams some love here. I'm going to go Georgia's defense. It's probably going to be Tate Rodemaker being the starting running back, but there was some news today that I really feel confident about this pick. Their star running back, Trey Benson, is declaring for the NFL draft. So who knows? I don't even know if Keon Coleman's going to play in this one. He's probably going to be a top 10 draft pick as well. So there might be some opt-outs on Florida State side. Pair that up with a backup quarterback going up against this Georgia secondary. I know that this Georgia secondary also has some guys that will probably opt out and enter the transfer portal. But I really like Georgia. Out of the bunch, I definitely like them as the top SEC fantasy defense for the New Year's Six. So that was a quick SEC fantasy draft. In a couple of weeks, we'll have the bowl games played out and all that, and we will declare who won the bowl season in SEC fantasy. But with that, we do have some exciting times in the conference. Like I mentioned, on Wednesday, there was a big 2-hour show on ESPN. The SEC officially unveiled the 2024 schedule for SEC with Texas and Oklahoma joining the conference. So what we're going to do over the next probably 10 to 20 minutes, maybe even more, when it gets to scheduling, we could probably go on and on and on, but we'll try to limit our talk on this. Let's go alphabetically down the line and look at the schedules and really turn our attention towards 2024 because pretty much the 2023 season is over. So let's start with our first team on the list with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Let's run down their schedule. Not a great start, honestly. There's probably going to be more appealing matchups in week number 1. They do get Western Kentucky. That's a high explosive offense. They host them. Week number 2, they get South Florida. And that weird and wackadoo game that we saw in week number 3 of this season. They do have an interesting road trip in week number 3 at Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I assume that they're going to be better next season. Year 1 with Luke Fickell, they'll probably be better. Then they get their open date at a very good time. It's sandwiched in between at Wisconsin. The next game that they get is a home game against Georgia. Those are probably going to be the top 2 teams heading into 2024. And then the schedule lightens up a bit. You get at Vanderbilt, South Carolina, at Tennessee, Missouri. And then what's interesting about this, every team gets 2 bye weeks. So it's not your traditional 1 bye week. You do get 2 bye weeks sandwiched in. It's the annual bye week before the at LSU game. That'll definitely be some tough ones. And then you finish off the season with Mercer, at Oklahoma, and Auburn. So looking at this schedule, how do you think the Alabama, schedule's looking up? You got at Wisconsin, you got the open date against Georgia. But outside of that, I think that this schedule is not that bad for them.
No, and they get that Georgia game at home. I think that goes a long way. The Missouri game also at home. Missouri could come in, being one of the top ranked teams in the country as well. They'll probably be a preseason top 10 if I had to guess. One thing that's notable to me now that we've entered this new era of SEC football is you don't see either Mississippi school in here nor Texas A&M. So they don't have to play Ole Miss. I think that's really advantageous. So there's a good chance that we wouldn't see Alabama and Ole Miss meet until potentially either in the playoff or in Atlanta for the SEC championship because they're no longer going to do divisions, right? It's just going to be the top 2 teams.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be the top 2 teams. So no more divisions anymore. I think that once we hit to 2025, they're going to go to a 9-conference. It's just really looking at, but the way that this sets up, like you mentioned, no the Mississippi schools. You still get the annual Thanksgiving rivalry game against the Iron Bowl against Auburn, and then Missouri. You get them at home, you get Georgia at home, so you get most of your tough games at home. Obviously, you have to go on the road to Death Valley at LSU, but LSU is going to be pretty much having a new offense, so there's going to be a lot of question marks in at Wisconsin. It's definitely a tough environment going into Camp Randall Stadium, but that's just a team that I think is just slowly coming up to, what they're supposed to be. So that's Alabama's schedule. Let's move on now to Arkansas' schedule. Arkansas will be looking to rebound from a not so great performance in 2023. They open up with pretty much a cupcake in Arkansas Pine Bluff in week number 1. Then they have a very tough road matchup at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, will probably be one of those favorites when we look at the 2024 Big 12 overall. And then they get UAB. And then they get back-to-back road games at Auburn and at Texas A&M. Actually, Texas A&M is pretty much a road game. It's in Arlington, Texas. But definitely 2 tough games back-to-back. And then you have Tennessee. You have LSU in the middle of October again, but you get them at home. And then you go on the road at Mississippi State. Then you got 3 straight home games, Ole Miss and Texas and Louisiana Tech. So Ole Miss and Texas getting them back-to-back. So not ideal. And then you finish off with Missouri. So there's definitely some tough games. What's really that stretch of games that you're looking at Arkansas schedule that can really give them some trouble?
I think it's right there towards the end. Now, 2 of the games are at home, but you go LSU, then at Mississippi State, home against Ole Miss, and then home against Texas. I mean, that's just a really tough stretch.
And no KJ Jefferson either.
Yeah, I think that was probably mutual. I think that had Arkansas really wanted him to be the starting quarterback next year, he would stick around. But I think that Sam Pittman knows that he's on the hot seat, and they just really want to – I think they'll probably bring in another transfer quarterback and his job's on the line. So I think they're going to have to really make a big leap forward. And I think they can. The schedule doesn't start off too hard. I mean, Oklahoma State, that's a tough road game. Auburn, I think, it could be a tough game. I mean, it is hard to play in the Plains, but I think that Arkansas could be on the same level as Auburn next year, as well as A&M, and Tennessee should take a step back. So first half of the schedule, not too bad. Back half, they better be ready, because I think Ole Miss and Texas are 2 teams I would have penciled into the 12-team playoff next year.
Yeah, that's definitely probably going to be the 2 top 12 teams. But some Missouri, good news, if you're an Arkansas fan, you get both of those games at home. But I think that stretch of Oklahoma State, UAB, Auburn, Texas A&M, if you go 2-2, I think that could definitely be a season saver. But if you lose all 3, then Sam Pittman's definitely going to be gone. So let's continue on in alphabetical order. Let's go on now to Auburn's schedule. Auburn, you really look at the start of the schedule. I mean, you get Alabama and A&M, California. They had Cal. You have to go on the road to Cal, so that's definitely good news if you're an Auburn Tiger fan. Then you get New Mexico. So, Cal's, going to be one of those teams that, going to the ACC, you don't know how they're going to really fare with that. And then, yeah, it's just so weird that, Cal is going to be in the ACC. They have to travel all the way to face off against Miami, the Florida States of the world. But after New Mexico, you open up with Arkansas. You get them at home. You get Oklahoma at home. Do they ever leave Jordan-Hare Stadium? Yes, they do. You have to go on the road to Georgia. So having Oklahoma and at Georgia back-to-back is definitely brutal, but you do get the bye week. And then after the bye week, you go on the road again to Missouri and on to Kentucky. Doesn't stack up very well. Then you get Vanderbilt an off week. You get ULM, Texas A&M, and then you finish off at Alabama. So I think that we could agree that Arkansas, like from Saturday, September 21st, all the way down to October 19th, is really where Auburn's either going to lose or win their schedule here.
Yeah, I mean, you got 5 straight home games, or 6 straight home games five straight home games to start the season. I mean, you don't leave Auburn for the whole month of September, but then you don't play a home game all of October. So that'll be a little tricky when they got to go away from home and play at Georgia, at Missouri. I know there's a bye week in between there, but that's as tough as it gets back to back. And then if you were to pull off an upset in one of those two games, you can't get caught slipping at Kentucky. So I think that we'll know a lot about this team by the 1st of October, like you mentioned. They are not playing New Mexico State this year, but they are playing New Mexico. Certainly can't overlook the Lobos either. So I think it's like for a lot of these teams, we're just going to see a lot harder schedules than we're necessarily used to seeing when you throw in teams like Oklahoma in the mix, Texas. I mean, those are marquee matchups, and we've seen both of them featured in all the schedules so far.
Yeah, I really like this. I mean, I know it gets tougher, but seeing like Oklahoma and Texas on the schedule definitely makes, especially if you host them, that's just going to make the environment even more fun. And then once we get to the 12-team playoffs, I mean, the stakes are going to be even higher in the regular season. So let's continue on down the line here, going through the 16 SEC teams in Florida. Oh boy, wait till we get to the back end of the schedule because it is probably the most brutal thing I've ever seen. Let's get it on. They host Miami to kick off the season. Miami is going to be one of those teams that has a lot of question marks. Van Dyke is entering the transfer portal. We'll see how good the Canes will be. Then they get Sanford at home. Then you get Texas A&M at home. So not too bad of a start. And then you go on the road to Mississippi State. Mississippi State, they have a new head coach, a new offense. Probably will have a new quarterback since Will Rogers is going to Washington. And then they finally get this matchup with UCF. UCF has been begging for Florida to play them, and they finally get this in-state matchup. Go on the road to Tennessee, and then you get Kentucky, and then you have a bye week sandwich in between there before the annual cocktail party matchup versus Georgia. This is where probably I've seen the hardest one. You get Georgia at Texas versus LSU versus Ole Miss and at Florida State. Will Billy Napier even survive before that?
Man, I give Florida props, though. I mean, I know that at the time they scheduled this, UCF was probably in the American Conference, but as you can see, Sanford is the only team they're playing that's not a Power 5 school. They are not playing any Group of 5 schools at all, and the one FCS opponent there in Sanford, who I think made the playoffs in their division. So a really tough schedule here. The bye weeks, they get one after Mississippi State before that UCF game. That's all fine and dandy, but I'd probably rather have one the weekend of November 16th before I play LSU and Ole Miss. So I think that that's just a brutal stretch to close things out, as you mentioned, especially traveling all the way up to Texas. I think that's going to be a really ruckus game. And then I would imagine they'd be just clawing for bowl eligibility by the time they play Ole Miss and Florida State, and have to go on the road to Florida State. That would be tough as well. So, yeah, not looking too good for Florida here. I mean, just kind of eyeballing it. I think this team is 6-6 at best.
Shoot, if they even get to 6-6, I'll be surprised. I don't even have to look at the other schedules. This is the hardest schedule in the country, not only in the SEC but in college football. I mean, my gosh, like you mentioned, Sanford is pretty much the only non-Group of 5 or FCS team. UCF's there in the Big 12, Miami in the ACC, Florida State in the ACC too. So good luck with that schedule, Florida. We'll see how they'll be able to navigate that. So let's continue on down the alphabet here. And let's continue on. Is it going to be the Georgia Bulldogs? Yes. So Georgia, they're going to be playing against Florida State. We'll see how they bounce back. This was a team that was gunning for back-to-back national championships. Alabama beat them, but they get to start off the season at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I feel like every season, they're either playing Sanford Stadium or Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but they get to face off against Clemson. That'll definitely be a treat for both fan bases, not too far of a drive. And then they go back to Sanford Stadium to face off against Tennessee Tech at Kentucky. Then they get an early bye week before their annual clash at Alabama. And then you get Auburn, Mississippi State at Texas. So, man, those 4 games right there, that's definitely a brutal stretch for them. They get the off week versus Florida at Ole Miss. Like I mentioned, and going to Ole Miss is definitely a tough environment. You get Tennessee at home, UMass, and finish off with Georgia Tech. So how do you think Georgia's going to be able to navigate this one, especially that September-October stretch?
Yeah, I think the bye week before Alabama is great. I think we'll see a really good test out of them in the opener against Clemson. but I suspect they'll be undefeated going into that Alabama game. But the one I'm worried about for them is the Auburn game right after it. I think if they get an emotional road win against Alabama or a close loss, I think Auburn's sitting there in really good shape. I forget who Auburn plays the week prior to that, but I would say Auburn is in an advantageous spot. They're playing them right after the Alabama game. And then a road trip to Texas. That could be tough as well. So the toughest 2 games under schedule, actually the toughest 3 games under schedule, are all on the road. But, this is one of the best teams in the country. I think they're battle tested. And I would not be surprised to see this team be as dominant as they have been in years past. But they can lose a game or 2 and still make the playoffs. So that's the difference this year. You don't have to fear one road loss out of those 3 games. I mean, if you go 2-3 or 2-1 out of the 3, then you did a really good job.
Yeah, the 12 team would definitely help that. But yeah, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, woo-wee, that's going to be a brutal one. It's no cupcake schedule like they had this year. It's definitely going to get tougher from now on. So let's move on down now. We're going to go on to Kentucky, I believe. Yes, we are. We're going to Kentucky. So Kentucky, they get Southern Miss to start off their season. They get South Carolina, and then they get Georgia. So, it's back-to-back SEC games, but good for them. They get them in the friendly confines of Kroger Field. And then they have to face off against Ohio. If you just saw what Ohio did with a couple of backups, they just absolutely destroyed Georgia Southern. Got to go on the road to Ole Miss. That's definitely going to be a tricky one. You get Vanderbilt at home, on the road to Florida versus Auburn, at Tennessee versus Murray State, at Texas, and then Louisville. I suspect Louisville to be good again. So Kentucky here, I mean, every team that we've really been through had a really rough stretch, but I think that stretch in the middle of Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, and then I know that you have Missouri State scheduled in between there, but at Texas and Louisville, that back half of the schedule is definitely going to be difficult for Kentucky team that's going to be having a lot of question marks heading into 2024.
Yeah, not only that, but we're so used to Kentucky getting off to such a hot start and then fading down the stretch. Well, you played Georgia in week 3, so I'm going to go ahead and say they lose that one.
At Ole Miss, probably lost.
Yeah, so I mean, usually we see this team start 4-0, 5-0, probably going to be 3-2. So they're gonna have to string together some wins down the stretch at Tennessee, and then playing at Texas, and then against Louisville to close the season. I mean, this team can't be at 5 wins going into that Texas game, because I think that could keep them from getting to a bowl game.
Yeah, you got to get your wins early, and I cannot wait for 2024. These schedules are getting me more excited for next season. We're just going to have some really good games to talk about every week. It's looking like that we're not going to have that cupcakes like week before the rivalry week, so that's good. Let's continue on.
To get some momentum before the playoffs,
Yeah, so let's continue on. It's the LSU Tigers schedule, and boy, if you have season tickets like Mr. Freddie, I'm sure that you are absolutely excited for the home games that you're going to be having in 2024. You get
Mr. Freddie almost let him up, but I think I'm going to have to
good thing you didn't, because you got a really good schedule here. I mean, USC, Las Vegas, Caleb Williams, no more Caleb Williams, no more Jaden Daniels, so we'll see. It's definitely going to be some question marks. So you get Nicholls at home. On a short week, keep in mind September 1st, that's a Sunday. So once again, LSU for the 3rd consecutive year will start off their season on a Sunday, then come back on a short week against Nicholls. On the road at South Carolina. I don't think that's when you wanted South Carolina, was to begin the season, when LSU is starting to figure it out. Then you come back home for 3 straight home games. UCLA in that home and home. They face them off against 2021. UCLA comes back to 2024 in Tiger Stadium. South Alabama, for the first time in program history, they get to face off against a Sun Belt foe. They get Ole Miss at home. And then you get back-to-back road games at Arkansas, at Texas A&M. You get the bye week. The other bye week is sandwiched between the South Alabama and Ole Miss game, it looks like. And then the second bye week is before the Alabama game on November 9th. You go on the road against Florida, and then you finish off with Vanderbilt in Oklahoma. Oklahoma might be the new rivals for the LSU Tigers. So like I mentioned, Wade, you're going to be having season tickets. How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I think this is a really cool schedule, a lot of national influence. You're playing both Southern Cal and UCLA, both the LA
Two
schools. They're
Big
both
Ten
Big Ten
teams.
schools now. That's a little weird, but yeah, the South Carolina game there at September 14th. I was really hoping it would be more like October 19th, because I think I'll be able to go to that game, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the Gamecocks and LSU play. But it would have been better personally if it was in October. And like you said, the Tigers might not have it figured out by then, so that would be embarrassing to go watch them lose. And let's look at the bye weeks. I mean, I think that's what stands out to me. They line up perfectly with the two toughest games on the schedule. They'll get one right before Ole Miss and then one right before Alabama. So that's really good, but can't let off the gas after you play Alabama, win or lose, because then you're going to have a Florida team that's really going to be vying for a bowl eligibility win, and then a home game against Vanderbilt, and then a new face there, Oklahoma at home. I don't know. Do you think that Oklahoma is the new Thanksgiving game, or do you think LSU will never really truly have a Thanksgiving rival? I mean, I could see either the SEC pairing LSU and Texas A&M every year continued on Thanksgiving, or they might go back to the Texas game, or this could just be a rotating conference game. I just don't know if they're going to protect that LSU and Oklahoma game when you could protect LSU and Ole Miss, LSU and Alabama, LSU and Mississippi State, but we'll have to see.
If you really look at the rivalry week that's already set up, Arkansas and Missouri, that's pretty much a locked-in rivalry game. You got the Egg Bowl, you got the
I wish they would go with it.
Yeah, you got the Iron Bowl, Texas A&M and Texas. That's going to be a Thanksgiving game until who knows how long. And then you really look at it, South Carolina and Clemson will still be there, Florida State, Florida, Georgia Tech, Georgia. So there's really not many other options. I feel like LSU and Oklahoma are just going to be that rivalry game that's just going to be locked in there. We'll see if Texas is on the schedule in 2025. Maybe they change it up, but this might be a new rivalry that you see against LSU and Oklahoma. So we will see, but this is definitely a treat if you're an LSU Tiger fan. That home schedule, definitely really good. The start of the season, I mean, that's going to tell all if this LSU team is going to be playoff worthy or not, because I know that USC, Nicholls, South Carolina, UCLA, South Alabama, Ole Miss, like those games are definitely going to define your season early on. Moving on to the next one in the alphabet, let's go on now to the Mississippi school. So this is the first-year head coach of Jeff Lebby. You start off pretty easy here, honestly. I mean, Eastern Kentucky at Arizona State. Arizona State hasn't been really good. You get Toledo. They've been pretty solid in the MAC. You get to host Florida, and then, oh boy, at Texas and at Georgia. Good luck with that. And then you get Texas A&M, Arkansas, and UMass in a triple header and home games. Then you go on the road to Tennessee. You get to host Missouri, and then you have to go on the road to Ole Miss. I think we can all agree. At Texas and at Georgia, I don't think that there's really really much of a harder duo than facing those, especially both on the road.
Yeah, that's really tough. Luckily, they do have a bye week sandwiched in between, but really doesn't make it easier. You still got to go play both games, and I would assume they'll lose those two. But then you do get an intriguing into the season with the home game against Missouri and then the road game against Ole Miss. So those are going to be two sets of really tough back-to-back games between Texas and Georgia and Missouri and Ole Miss. I think there's going to be some growing pains for this team, but I think I see a good stretch where they could string together a couple wins. I mean, I think they could start the year 4-0, conceivably, maybe 3-1. But then I think they could easily win 3 in a row there at home in October between Texas A&M, Arkansas, and UMass. So there's some winnable games here. I think this team's looking at 6-6 at best because of some of the tough stretches there, but it could be a rough year for Jeff Lebby in his first season, but I do like the hire.
If you see here also, no LSU, no Auburn, and no Alabama. So that is something that we haven't seen in a while. But I agree with you. I think that there is some tough stretches, but all in all, you have to be pretty content. You get A&M, Arkansas at home, you get Missouri at home, Florida at home too. So those are some winnable games there in Stark Vegas. So we'll see how Jeff Levy does in year number 1. Let's go on now to the next team here, which is going to be Ole Miss. Ole Miss, I mean, they start off the season pretty easy here. Let's be honest. You get Furman, Middle Tennessee. You go on the road to Wake Forest, host Georgia Southern, hosts Kentucky, go on the road to South Carolina. If they don't go undefeated there, I'd be absolutely shocked. I think they're better than all of those teams. You go on the road to LSU, at home against Oklahoma. That'll definitely be fun. Then you go on the road against Arkansas, host Georgia, go to Florida. It's like I feel like you go on the road, you go home. It's like back and forth for Ole Miss down the stretch here, and then you host Mississippi State. I'm really looking at all the schedules. This has to be one of the easiest ones in the SEC.
Yeah, I think this is good. You dodge Alabama, but you do play LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. Those are all going to be tough games, but I think this team is going to be probably the preseason number 3 in the conference, but easily could be the best team in the conference. Georgia and Alabama are going to get the name recognition, but Ole Miss is putting in the work right now in the transfer portal, and they already had a really talented young roster coming back. So I think the road game at LSU worries me a little bit for Ole Miss. I think historically LSU has played really well at home in that series, but I think they can win a shootout against Oklahoma at home, and then the Georgia game, we'll really know where this team's at by then. But with it being at home, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss wins that. So this team is looking really good at 10-2, maybe 11-1, and I think that right now I would pencil them in the top 10 next year and making the playoff.
Yeah, I honestly might even pencil in going to the SEC championship. Who knows? But that LSU through Georgia stretch, that feels like a very important stretch for this team.
You go 2-1 there, you're looking good.
You're a playoff team if you go 2-1, and if you just take care of business out of the rest. So that's Ole Miss's 2024 schedule. Let's continue on here. Let's go on now to the Missouri Tigers. I think that can we both agree that Missouri is one of our teams that we're definitely going to be watching next season. And I mean, if you really look at it, easy start to the season here. Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt, Murray State, and Buffalo. They're not really great. Boston College, they're teams in the ACC. Poor Vanderbilt. I just don't think they're going to be able to survive in this new SEC. Then you get the bye week. I don't even know why you need the bye week after you just went through 4 cupcakes, but sure, put it there. And then you go on the road to Texas A&M at UMass. Okay. That's interesting. But then you get back-to-back really tough matchups. Auburn at home. You go on the road to Tuscaloosa at Alabama. You get your off week. And then you host Oklahoma. This definitely has some ties to the old Big 12. You go on the road to South Carolina at Mississippi State, Arkansas. Do I not see 10-2 or 11-1 here?
Yeah, I think they fared pretty well on the schedule. I think 10 wins is definitely in the cards for this team. No reason to not start the season probably 7-0.
Yeah, they better be undefeated going into Bama.
Yeah, I think that realistically 10-2. I mean, I think this team should be favored in every game except for the Alabama and potentially the Oklahoma game, but we're also putting a lot of faith in Oklahoma.
No Gabriel there anymore, so
yeah. This team's not going to be necessarily the offensive juggernaut that we're used to seeing them in the Big 12. I mean, they kind of took a step back the last 2 years offensively anyways, and it was against inferior defenses. So I'm not so sure Oklahoma's going to jump right in and be the Oklahoma that we're, accustomed to seeing. I think they're going to be a tough game for sure, and I think overall they're going to settle in really nicely to the SEC, but I could see them having like a 7-5 first year. So honestly, they could go 11-1 here, but that's if Missouri can sustain the success they had and keep everybody together, through the transfer portal.
I think so far, Missouri and Ole Miss are the 2 easiest schedules that I've seen so far. So maybe we have a potential clash of Missouri and Ole Miss in Atlanta in the SEC championship. Who knows? But we say that it's easy, and then it become, Missouri could fall flat on their face and lose to like A&M or Auburn, and it just comes crashing down. So you never know. It looks easy on paper, but once you hit the field, it could definitely change. Let's continue on looking at the 2024 SEC schedules. And we will now move on to Oklahoma, a team that we just talked about. Not too bad of a start for them. You get Temple in Norman, then you get Houston. Okay, I guess they just want to continue on with the Big 12 games. Houston is a current Big 12 team. Tulane's going to be having a new head coach. They hired John Sumrall, the former Troy head coach. And then you get your first taste in the SEC, hosting Tennessee, and then you go on the road. You do not want to go to Jordan Hare whatsoever. I mean, anything can happen when you go to that stadium. Then you go on the off week. The off week really comes at a good time. You're going to need a bye week after you go on the road to that crazy stadium. Then you get at the Cotton Bowl, the annual Texas versus Oklahoma rivalry game. Then you go back at home against South Carolina. At Ole Miss, you get Maine sandwiched in there between some really tough games against Ole Miss and Missouri. And then look at this tough one. You get Alabama at home and at LSU. Good luck with that, Sooners. Welcome to the SEC.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a tough introduction. I mean, as you see, it kind of eases in. You play your teams that we've seen them play in the last few years, and then they've even played Tennessee recently out of conference. So then you get a road trip against Auburn, familiar foe against Texas, and then it really sets in. You play Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU, and Missouri. So yeah,
Missouri.
This is probably the toughest one I've seen.
That's probably like the top of the load there in the SEC with Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri. Yeah, it might be a rough one.
I see 7-5. I
see 7-5 too. I mean, you get Alabama at home, but they're going to be really good. But you get Missouri, Ole Miss, and LSU on the road. LSU is going to be figured out by then.
Texas.
Really?
That's Texas, 5 losses right there.
Yeah, Texas. They're going to be I think that they're going to be one of the favorites heading into next season in the SEC. Especially with the returners, what they're going to be doing in the transfer portal. So, welcome to the SEC, Oklahoma. So let's move on now to the next team here on the list. We'll continue on down the alphabet. Let's go with the South Carolina Gamecocks. They face off against Old Dominion, and then they get on the road against Kentucky. I think that's on the road. I'm just going to go with that. Yes, it is on the road. And then you get LSU, Akron. Then you go on the bye before hosting Ole Miss. So that is a good note. You get LSU and Ole Miss at home. And then, but you do, man, my gosh, this is tough. At Alabama and then at Oklahoma. And then you get the bye week. You get Texas A&M at Vanderbilt, at home against Missouri, Wofford. And then you go on the road to Clemson. Does South Carolina go bowling with this schedule?
It really just depends on some of the adjustments they make. But I think there's probably 4 losses built in to the schedule right away, maybe even 5. So yeah, you don't play Georgia, but you do play Alabama and Oklahoma, LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss. That's just really brutal.
The pick of the litter here with this schedule. Outside, they didn't get Texas. That's about the only hard team that they didn't really get. They didn't get Georgia, but they had to, really their tough games that you really see is Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, Kentucky. Really, outside of that, you get most of your hard opponents at home, so that is some good news.
No Florida or Georgia. That's going to be interesting.
That's definitely weird to not see South Carolina facing off against them, but I'm sure but you get to substitute them with Alabama and Oklahoma. So who do you want really on your schedule? So let's move on now. Believe to the T's here might be going on to the Tennessee. So they get Chattanooga week number 1. On the road against NC State. NC State, they're going to be one of those teams in the ACC that's going to be scary good too. I believe they get Kent State, and then they go on the road to Oklahoma and Arkansas in back-to-back weeks. And then you get Florida. You get 4 straight home games at Neyland, and that's definitely going to be a crucial stretch. Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi State. On the road against Georgia. At home against UTEP and Benton. Honestly, this is not too bad of a schedule that's shaping up for Tennessee in 2024.
No, not really. You're already accustomed to playing Georgia every year. The new game, and you're accustomed to playing Alabama every year. So that doesn't really change. The only thing that does is you play Oklahoma, but you don't play Missouri. So honestly, I think they came out ahead. One of the few teams that benefited from the schedule change because they already have those built-in games against Alabama and Georgia. So to play Oklahoma, I'd rather play them than Missouri next year or Texas. So I think this is pretty solid. I mean, I think Tennessee is going to take a step back a little bit as a team, but I could see them going 8-4, 9-3.
Yeah, 8-4, 9-3 definitely looks realistic on this schedule. Let's move on now. I believe it's going to be to the other new team that's going to be joining the conference in
The
the
UT
Texas
battles.
Longhorns. Man, what a stretch this is. So they do get Colorado State, and then boom, at Michigan. I mean,
Really, I did
my
not know they
gosh.
were playing.
We might see this in the national championship or not. If we don't, they're going to be probably two of the best teams heading into 2024. UTSA, that's always they're always a really good group of five. You get ULM, Mississippi State at home. So I feel like if they can navigate that, at Michigan, if they win that one, I mean, the world's going to be their oyster in 2024. They go on to their bye week before versus Oklahoma, and then versus Georgia at Vanderbilt off, and then you get Florida at Arkansas, Kentucky at Texas A&M. So Texas's schedule is really front loaded the way that you look at it.
Yeah, it definitely is. No favors there with a tough road game against Michigan, but of course that's outside of the SEC's control. Yeah, I think it's a good introduction to the SEC. They get a home game, as does Oklahoma, for their first SEC game. And then getting Georgia, the toughest team on the schedule, at home is also pretty nice. So I think this is a pretty fair schedule. If I'm Texas, I would be pretty content with this. I think they could go 11-1, 10-2, 12-0. I mean, we don't really know what the ceiling is for this team yet, but I do have high hopes for them with Quinn Ewers coming back. I would say that they should be right behind Alabama and Georgia going into the season, maybe even behind Ole Miss, but either at 3 or 4.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that probably their floor I would give them right now is 10-2. I think that this is definitely now, I feel like your toughest one is obviously that Michigan game, but if you look at the tough SEC ones, Oklahoma, that's a 50-50 split pretty much, but you get Georgia at home, Florida at home too, Kentucky at home. You go on the road to Texas A&M. It's a rivalry game. Texas A&M definitely going to get up for that one. But all in all, not too bad of a schedule for Texas. Let's go on now to their rival, Texas A&M, how the Aggies will look at Mike Elko's first year and how they'll have – boom. First one, you get Notre Dame at home. That's definitely going to be a treat for both fan bases. You get McNeese at Florida, Bowling Green, and then you have Arkansas in the Southwest Classic in AT&T Stadium. You do host Missouri. That's definitely good news. And then you get your first of two. Your bye weeks are pretty much like very close to each other. And then you get at Mississippi State, host LSU at South Carolina. You go on the bye. And oh boy, New Mexico State, they're back again. We'll see if they can do it. And then you get at Auburn in Texas. So really some good games, Notre Dame, Texas, obviously LSU at home. So what are your overall thoughts on the Aggies 2024 schedule?
I think it's manageable. The Notre Dame game out of the conference, we don't really know how good Notre Dame's going to be yet, but I think that'll be a competitive ball game. After that, it's pretty winnable until you play Missouri. But it is a home game, and that's a tough trip for Missouri. They got some hard games to look out for as well. And then you get LSU a little bit earlier in the season, this time at home, and then pretty winnable game sandwiched in between the LSU game with Mississippi State and South Carolina. So I think this is pretty favorable for Texas A&M. First and last game are probably your two hardest, and then Missouri and LSU are definitely tough teams to beat too. I think where this team's at right now, 7-5, 6-6, seems realistic.
Yeah, very manageable. Let's continue on, I believe, to our last team, and that will be the Vanderbilt Commodores. So we'll see how Vanderbilt does. So Virginia Tech in Nashville, that'll definitely be a great game to watch for them. Alcorn State at home, at Georgia State, at Missouri, off. And then you get Alabama at home, at Kentucky, Ball State. Oh, my gosh. Texas comes to Nashville, at Auburn. Oh, my gosh. South Carolina, and then you're off. And then at LSU and Tennessee. It starts off not too bad. And then you get the bye week, and then like punch after punch after punch after punch. So
no Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, no Georgia, but you got to get Texas, and you go on the road to Auburn, then you get Alabama, then you go on the road to LSU. So I don't think Vanderbilt got that great of a draw here in 2024.
No, they didn't. But let's be realistic. I mean, Vanderbilt wasn't going to be good next year, anyways.
That's true.
I think we're going to see uh adjustment to the schedule in 2025 when they go to the 9 conference games. I think that they're kind of letting some of the traditional um rotations work out. Like Vanderbilt hasn't played Alabama at home in a really long time. So that was already on the schedule. They're just going to let it play out. And then that's a game we won't see for a while, probably. It's not going to be an annual game. Same with Texas. I mean, I don't think that's going to be an annual game. What Vanderbilt wants to see is hopefully Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky. If they could play those teams every year, I think those are teams that historically they can compete with and teams they do want to see on the schedule. So I'd rather just get the tough ones out this year if I'm Vanderbilt, take my licks and build my program for 2025.
Yeah, might as well just put Georgia if you wanted some more tough ones. But they escaped them, but definitely brutal ones. So that is our 2024 SEC schedules. If you really look at all 16 ones, they're all tough in their own manner. So definitely going to be a great season coming up. Let's go on now to the New Year's 6 bowl games. It's presented by Fanatics. We'll go pretty quick with our link there. I'm going to scroll it through. If you want to use our link, a week away from Christmas, you have any last minute Christmas shopping, go ahead and use our link and take advantage of some great deals that Fanatics runs every day. All right, let's go ahead and get to the SEC bowl games preview and also just the normal New Year's 6 as well. So the first one that we have, we'll be kicking off the New Year's 6. This is a Goodyear Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas. Number 9, Missouri versus number 7, Ohio State. Like you mentioned, no Makah McCord. McCord announced that he's going to Syracuse, so Ohio State is going to be rolling with their backup. So you're going to go with the SEC or go with the Big Ten there in Dallas?
I think I've tipped my cap a little bit on this one. I'm going to go with Missouri for sure in this one. I think Ohio State has had some attrition in the transfer portal. I think Missouri has kept their unit together. Missouri has one of the best offensive trios in the country, and I think they'll show it on the national stage against Ohio State.
Yeah, definitely could be a great way to finish off the season for Eli Drinkwitz and build momentum to a season that is definitely going to be fun in the SEC. I'm going to go with Missouri too. I really like how this team has been playing all season. That offense has been rolling. Their defense has also been improving too. Without no Kyle McCord, I don't even think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to play in this one. I'll be completely honest with you. I'll be surprised if he does. So with that, I think that, Ohio State's defense, they're going to have to keep the Buckeyes in this game, but I just think that it's just going to be too many playmakers on Missouri. So is Chet going to continue the SEC clean sweep and go with Missouri? And let's see it. Yes, he is. MIZZOU for the boys on SEC Talk. Let's continue on with our New Year's 6 bowl game slate as we go on to the next one. And it is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. It's another SEC versus Big Ten matchup. Number 11 Ole Miss versus number 10 Penn State. Two teams that went 10-2 in the regular season. Who gets win number 11 to finish off their 2023 campaign?
This one was really tough for me. I think Penn State is a good football team. I think Ole Miss kind of fizzled down the stretch a little bit. They have not showed up in the big games this year. They didn't play Alabama too competitively in the second half, and they just got absolutely dismantled by Georgia. So it's kind of tough for me to trust them on the big stage, but I like this game being in the South for Ole Miss, and I think they have a ton of momentum right now around the program through the transfer portal, and I think that they got the guys bought in. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss on a close one here. I think it'll be kind of low scoring, but Ole Miss is going to come through.
Yeah, the key for Ole Miss's defense is going to be able to stop that 1-2 punch that Penn State has with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Those guys get going, then half of the time Penn State's going to win the game. I feel like this is going to be more of a defensive game. There's not going to be many touchdowns scored in this one. I think that Ole Miss's defense, they really played strong down the stretch. Penn State, if they can keep Drew Aller contained in that running game contained, I think that's going to be really close. But like you mentioned, I think that being so close to Ole Miss, I'm going to go with Ole Miss in this one. Penn State in the big games just really folded against Michigan and Ohio State. So both riding with the SEC. Is Chet also going to ride with the conference? And
Yeah,
yes, he
yeah.
does. So all rolling with the Rebels. Sorry, Jacob. No confidence. I'm sure that Jacob's going to be picking Penn State in this one, but all rolling with Ole Miss in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Let's continue on with our New Year's Six bowl slate with the next one. Number 6 Georgia versus number 5 Florida State in the Capital One Orange Bowl. This is pretty much the two teams that got left out of the dance. There's definitely going to be some opt-outs on both sides. So you're going to go with the Seminoles or continue the roll with the SEC?
I just don't know where Florida State's head's at. I think Georgia's going to take this. I know they had a lot of guys transfer out, but I just still have a lot of faith in this team. I thought they were going to win the national championship. I still think they could if you stuck them in the playoff tomorrow. So I'm going to go Georgia.
I just think that there's not enough offense for Florida State to win this one. I think their defense, they've really carried them, but give me Georgia in this one. I think they win them by 2 touchdowns. Both of these teams are going to be pissed off, but with Trey Benson not being there anymore, I just don't know where Florida State's going to be able to find their offense, especially if Keon Coleman decides to opt out too. So I'm just going to go with Georgia. We'll see if Carson Beck decides to come back or decides to declare for the NFL draft. That'll definitely be key for Georgia moving forward. Is Chet going to go with Georgia, go with Florida State? He's going to go with the Dogs. So all agreement so far. We will see if that changes moving forward. Continue on with the next bowl game here in the New Year's Eve and day games. Number 23 Liberty versus number 8 Oregon in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. Are you going to go with the Cinderella story or just go with Bo Nix in the Quack Attack?
Oh, man, I really want to pull the trigger here on Liberty, but I got to go with the overall body of work. Bo Nix, I think he goes out with a bang, and Oregon gets this done. I like that it's in Phoenix for Oregon. I think they'll be comfortable there. I think they'll have a lot of fans. Liberty's going to bring their A game, but I got Oregon.
Yeah, Liberty is going to bring their A game, but that's a tough road trip going all the way to the West Coast. That's going to be a lot of Oregon fans making the trip with Bo Nix playing. I think that this offense, they have a bad taste in their mouth against Washington. Washington really handled them in the Pac-12 championship. Bo lost out on the Heisman Trophy. I think that this team is going to be motivated to win this one. So give me Oregon. Chet, is he going to go with an upset here? No, he's not. He's going to go with the Pac. Well, this is the last time that we'll see Oregon in the Pac-12 before they move on to the Big Ten. So all rolling with the Ducks. Let's continue on with our bowl season slate here, and let's move on now to the granddaddy of them all. They're one of 2 college football playoff semifinal games on January 1st. This one, I believe, will be the afternoon game, and then the Texas and Washington game will be the night game in New Orleans. So Alabama, the SEC champ, number 4 seed in the college football playoff versus the number 1 overall seed, Michigan. Michigan undefeated in the Big Ten. Alabama, that 1 loss coming to Texas, who's also in the college football playoff. So are you going to roll with the Tide or go with your preseason overall national champ and go blue?
I'm flipping back to the blue.
Ah.
Originally, I did pick Alabama in this one. I said, you let the genie out the bottle. They're going to win the national championship. But the more I think about it, this Alabama team is not a very complete football team. They got very lucky against Auburn. They didn't look overwhelmingly impressive in wins over Ole Miss or Texas A&M or even LSU. They're hot and they played their best game of the season against Georgia, but I just like the overall body of work for Michigan, and I think that run game is going to do pretty well against Alabama. So I'm going to go with Michigan in this one, but honestly, this playoff to me just seems to be the most competitive one we've seen.
Yeah, definitely really good 2 matchups there. Michigan, the run game, you hit it on the head. Blake Corum has been the MVP. J.J. McCarthy hasn't really been able to do too much. He hasn't been able to ask too much too. But they do have some weapons on the outside. Roman Wilson, that's pretty much his go-to wide receiver. That defense, that Michigan defense is definitely going to test Jalen Milroe. Let's see if that Michigan defense can contain, Jalen Milroe, like the Texases and even Auburn was able to contain him at times. But Alabama just feels like a team that was dead at the start of the season, and they are just waking up. I mean, beating Georgia, did honestly not see that coming. So I'm going to go with Alabama. I'm going to stick with the SEC in this one until Michigan wins a playoff game. I can't really pick them. So I think that with Nick Saban, you give them a month to prepare for this one. I know it's a tough road trip for both of these teams, especially Alabama, going that far to Pasadena, but give me the Tide. All right, we have a tiebreaker, Chet. You're going to have to decide it. And are you going to go with the SEC or the Big Ten? He is going to go with Alabama. So you're the lone Michigan Wolverine on this one, too, rolling with Alabama Crimson Tide in the Rose Bowl. The next one that we have is the Sugar Bowl in the Big Easy between number 3 Texas versus number 2 Washington. Texas, the one loss to Oklahoma. They are the Big 12 champs. Washington, they went undefeated there. So you're going to go with the Horns or go with the Dogs?
Well, didn't we see this one last year in the Valero Bowl? And it was a very good win for Texas. Texas won or Washington won?
UW won.
That's right. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to go with a little recency bias here. And I think Michael Penix is not angry about the Heisman, but I think he has a lot of unfinished business. I mean, I think this Washington team is legit. Texas, I think that they're on fire right now. I really like them. I think the winner of this game could win the national championship outright. But I just have more faith in the overall team of Washington and the defense. And another thing for Texas that scares me is they're already thin at running back. Their backup quarterback just transferred out. He said he wanted to stick around, but in order to get a shot at a starting job elsewhere, he has to leave now. So all of a sudden, you're looking at Arch Manning coming in if Quinn Ewers were to go down. And against a very physical Washington defense playing on turf, could happen. So I'm going to go with Washington in this one. I think that it's going to be really close. I think both of these teams are capable of winning the championship. So I'm excited to tune into this one.
I think if you're going to ask me, what playoff semifinal is going to provide us the most points, I'm going to lean to this one. I just think that if you look at Texas's secondary, they've definitely been banged up. Washington defense has definitely been playing well down the stretch. But if you really look at the games that they struggled, Arizona State, Stanford game, that defense really struggled. So these are two talented quarterbacks with Quinn Ewers on one side and Michael Penix. But I've been beating the Washington drum since week number 1, and I ain't going to come back now. Give me UW. I know this is a tough road trip. I mean, this is a long plane ride. Texas, most of they're going to take over New Orleans. So I think this is definitely going to be one of the best games, not only of the weekend, but of the bowl season here. This is definitely going to be an exciting one. So both rolling with Washington. Chuck gonna go with Texas or Washington, and he's gonna go with Hook'em Horns. So he has that Alabama-Texas rematch. You have Michigan versus Washington. I have Alabama versus Washington. So let's keep it on this slide. Who finishes off and wins the national championship?
Thought I had 2 weeks to stew on this.
No. We could say it now, but in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
No, we'll make a pick now, and then we'll reset. I'm going to go with Washington. That could change, but for now, I'm going to go with Washington.
You change every day the way that you've been picking. But I'm sticking with Washington. I said literally the first show that we did that Washington was not only going to make the playoff, but win the national championship. I'm not copping out now, but I feel like the winner of this one right here, I think that's going to be your national champion. I don't think.
Yeah, I do too. I think we're going to see a battle-tested team.
Yeah. All right. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. SEC schedule reaction and the SEC teams in the New Year's Six bowl games. We appreciate everyone tuning in both on our Facebook and also our YouTube page. Next week we won't be having a show since it's Christmas Eve, and we're going to let everyone and our viewers enjoy the time off. I know that the week after that is New Year's Eve, but we will have a show either sometime before that or after that. We'll just have to decide on how our schedules shape up. But we'll be having a show in 2 weeks to really recap the bowl season. Then once again, make our updated national championship pick. And then that'll probably be it for SEC football, unless if Alabama makes it to the national championship game. Who knows if they do, but there'll probably be at least one more show on the football season, and then that will really jump into our off season. And so that's pretty much going to wind it down here on this Sunday night edition of SEC Talk. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week and their holiday season. So long for now.